Well, good afternoon, everybody. We want to thank you for joining us today. This is Tim Vire, Customer Success Manager at Passageways, working with onboard customers. I also have with me today moderating our Q&A, Jillian Walker. Jill, can you say hi?
Hi, everyone.
We're really excited to have you all with us today, and just want to give you a couple of things up front just to make sure you understand kind of how things work. We would ask you to use the Q&A feature there in the Zoom tool to post your questions. Jill will answer those, most of those probably directly through that tool. We will try, if we have the opportunity, to get some of them live answered in the broadcast and hopefully even direct those towards our guests today. Today, we're very excited to have some special guests join us who have mapped out a unique way to use onboard that meets a huge need of just about any business. Creating and hosting a business continuity plan, or you might have heard it called a disaster recovery plan, and doing so right inside onboard. They did this by creating a very special meeting that contains everything they need to keep their business in operation in the event of a disaster or some severe unplanned business disruption. This is something that we're sure many of you either have in some form or have contemplated the need to have one and developed it. Today, we're going to look at how this idea evolved into a tangible reality, a plan that's fully detailed, including all the necessary resources, and is hosted on a cloud-based platform that provides both encrypted security and immediate access with an internet connection. I want to welcome to our program today Ryan Larson, Director of Professional Services, and Jason Smith, Vice President of Products and Strategy, both from LAFCU, a Lansing, Michigan-based credit union and a valued customer of Passageways. Ryan and Jason, thank you so much for joining us today for our June coffee break.
Yes, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Jill, for hosting.
Yep, thanks for having us.
Great. So just a little bit of the backstory here and how we came to learn about what Ryan and Jason have been working on that we're going to share today. I spoke with Ryan a few months ago, just in just a general outreach call, and was asking him some questions about the ways that LAFCU utilizes onboard. And he brought up this idea of business continuity plan that they were working through. He described it a little bit to me about what it was for them and kind of how they were going about it, that they were still working on it. And as we were talking, I thought, this would be probably a really useful thing for us to put in front of other customers. We know that a lot of you probably already have some kind of BCP or disaster recovery plan in place, but maybe didn't think about using onboard as a way to facilitate it more effectively. Just a little bit about the group here. LAFCU joined the Passageways family with onboard in November of 2017. So guys, I would love to have you to share with our audience here today, what initially led to your decision to purchase an online board portal?
Absolutely. So thank you, Tim. And we're happy to share our experience with everyone on the phone call. Now, going back to 2017, historically, whenever we had information to share with our board members, whether that was, financials or any other type of pre-board meeting documentation that they needed to review before that meeting, we would email them securely to each board member. So we would use kind of an archaic method. We had an old version of Zix mail that we would send out to them. The process was very cumbersome. It didn't always work seamlessly with the attachments, but really, we have somewhat of an older board, so that audience, it wasn't a very efficient way to get documents over to them. So what we identified was we really needed a platform that could house and maintain all of this documentation, and one that our board members could easily navigate through to find what they need. But we also needed to make sure that it was a secure way to send these confidential documents to them.
Okay, great. Now, what were some of the specific things about onboard and what it provides for you that led you to choose that product?
Yep. So onboard, basically, we wanted a solution that, like I said, would house all of our past documentation, our present board meeting documentation. We wanted a solution that would house all of that we would provide to the board, but in a platform that's also really easy to use. So for us, it was really a matter of know your audience. So when we looked at the onboard platform, they met our needs, and its simplicity of use, it made a big impact on our decision to choose Passageways. We were able to mimic our board meeting agenda, the ones that we always had on paper. We were able to make that look identical in the portal to avoid any type of inconvenience or any disruption on our board side with them getting used to using the portal. So, our board members, they travel frequently. A lot of them are snowbirds. It's a term we have in Michigan of retirees or whatnot that, will go down to Florida for the winter. So since they travel frequently, having all this information, either on their mobile device or their tablet at their fingertips, whether they're on the plane or even if they're in an area where they don't have Wi-Fi, that feature that OnBoard has where you can download them to your device, the board meetings and whatnot, that proved to be very beneficial for our board members.
Great. That sounds like probably, I think a lot of our folks on the webinar with us today can probably resonate with some of the things you've said, and we're very, very excited to have you as part of our Passageways family, and glad that it's worked out so well. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page today, we're going to just review quickly the idea of a business continuity plan. And so thank you, Wikipedia, for this great information. Business continuity planning, basically the process of creating a system of prevention and recovery to help you deal with potential threats to your company and to your ongoing operations. In addition to prevention, the goal really with a BCP or disaster recovery plan is to permit ongoing operation before and during execution of disaster recovery. So essentially, it's just planning for the worst and hoping it doesn't happen. But if it does, you're ready, and you should be able to keep things moving forward so that you don't have a total disruption of business and interruption of things you're able to do to help your clients. And this is exactly why we thought it was so important to talk about today, because this is a great way to try to come up with that. So guys, if you would just briefly describe your process of what your business continuity plan kind of consisted of, in the sense of the status of it, how you provided it to folks and everything before you decided to utilize OnBoard for it.
Absolutely. So, full transparency here, our business continuity plan and process, it was very archaic. We had a vendor come in a while back, years ago, to help us build our BCP. And not much has really changed since that took place. Everyone had a paper copy of the plan, and they each had their own binders. And it was their responsibility to, make sure that they had it in the event that, the BCP would need to be activated. For our employees, on the surface, it looked very intimidating. So it was a big binder, lots of sections, it had tons of information, and most of it was specific to different incident scenarios. And sometimes, those scenarios could never take place. Sometimes they could take place twice in a year. But in the event that it would be activated, what we really have to do is, as management, we need to think quick and take action to ensure our business continuity and timely resumption of our services. So having a massive book that really wasn't easy to navigate through really made this process difficult when we had to activate it. And, living in Lansing, we've had some crazy snowstorms recently, so we've actually had to activate it a couple of times. And this really, those activations is what really drove us to find a more simpler solution.
Okay, and on that same thread, then, I'm sure there were different things you probably considered as avenues to improve that for yourselves. What led to your decision to create the BCP in OnBoard?
So actually, OnBoard was not the first choice. We had brought on a different vendor that is specific to building an electronic business continuity plan. We brought them on, gosh, Jason, that's probably last year, I think. And our IT department had been kind of working on building our existing plan into it. When it came across Jason and I to review it, we were diving into the implementation, looking at the different pages that had been built, and we had to take a step back because we realized we were actually going backwards by bringing this system on, because the platform we chose, it was even more intimidating. It had a very busy screen. We even thought, something like this is probably a good platform for, Bank of America or Chase or somewhere that has thousands of employees. We have, in mid-Michigan here, we've got probably 165 employees, I believe, right around there. And so we had to pause and ask ourselves, what's the purpose of having this plan? And we needed it so that in the event that it would be activated, they know right where to go. It's simple. It follows a certain flow, so that wherever they are, if they're at a restaurant and we find out that something went on with a branch or whatnot, they can go right in and know exactly what they need to do instead of fumbling around. And so I had helped implement the OnBoard for our board portal back in, the end of 2017. And I said, well, why don't we use this? We can take this book and create it electronically and just have it simple. The managers already have access to the portal for our board meetings and whatnot, so they're familiar with it. It makes training easier. And whenever we have to make updates to the plan, it'll push a notification to them right then and there.
Great. So basically you were able to utilize a product and service that you already had built in as an expense, and no increased expenditure for it, and one that you'd already developed familiarity with and had in practice for other things. So that's pretty smart thinking, sounds like. How long did it take you to get the BCP created and operational and OnBoard?
So in order to get it created and OnBoard, that didn't take too long. We're pretty much in meetings throughout the week. So with that, it took us about a week to build it in. And then to bring it operational, that took a little bit longer. I would say no more than maybe a month, maybe 5 weeks at the most. And the reason why it took that long was because we have 10 branches, spread throughout mid-Michigan. And, training all the managers at once isn't always the easiest thing to do. So we kind of did that in the transition, step-by-step phase where we train a couple groups of them at a time. But yeah, I would say no more than just five weeks at the most.
So fairly painless. And again, since you weren't having to introduce a completely new tool to people, that probably their comfort level and their learning speed was increased because of that. So that's great. I mean, that's really, whenever we're trying to find a way to incorporate something additional into our flow of what we do and how we do it, we always want to try to find the path of least resistance, and it sounds exactly like what you're able to do. So I'm going to throw it on the screen now for everybody that's watching here. What we got was some screenshots from Ryan and Jason that are just basically a quick look. And you can see it looks like probably what you've created many, many times in OnBoard as users, a meeting agenda. But we're going to look at different pieces. So I broke it up in 3 pieces. And guys, you'll know which pieces you're looking at here. So what I want to do is just kind of talk through them. But first, this slide here shows that you really have to scale this thing to your needs, right? So as Ryan referenced a moment ago, there are going to be different business sizes. And with that, whether or not you have multiple locations or how many of those there may be, definitely is going to impact the diversity of your plan to reflect the scope of that business. So in this first screen we're looking at here, Ryan, if you could maybe just kind of talk to us about what we see here as far as the different plan scenarios you created here.
Yep, absolutely. Sorry, Tim, we had you on mute there for a second. I'm going to actually pass this one over to Jason Smith here. Jason is actually, he used to be our VP of Product and Strategy, and just recently, just a few days ago, actually, accepted a position as Chief Lending Officer here. So Jason, would you want to explain the section?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory what you see in front of you. I mean, we just took our plans and just incorporated them into this structure. And this fits our needs. And I would encourage everybody just to build a plan that fits your specific needs. Again, as Ryan alluded to in the other application that we looked at, it was rather daunting, and there was just too much to it. And so this just enabled us to do what we wanted to do here at LAFCU. And so we did not have to reinvent the wheel. We took what we had, we tweaked it, and we incorporated it into this application.
Great. And yeah, folks, it is pretty self-explanatory. You can just kind of read down the list. You see if it was just a single location that was affected, a plan to deal with just that piece. If it's all locations or if it's related to a specific aspect like a power loss, but not necessarily a building or facility loss. So yeah, it's important to think through all those things. But again, you're able to really put those into a structure in OnBoard that allows you to readily see those. And then, as you can tell, as you've built meetings before, each of those has that little drop-down arrow there to the right that tells you there is documentation to kind of go along with that. So we also then, the next piece of the plan then goes into the various aspects of putting it into practice. Could one of you guys maybe address this one just a little bit and just kind of tell maybe a little bit of description here about what these represent?
Yeah, so kind of the same thing here. You know, when we talk about our business continuity plans, you know, we have them into steps. And these were steps that were organized and reviewed a few years ago. And we've just kind of, as we put this into the onboard application here, we just kind of went again and tweaked these and updated and so on and so forth. So again, these are standard steps that pretty much, I'm sure everybody on the call here has some way, shape, or form of these types of plans in their organizations. Mm-hmm. So this is just what works for us.
And to add to that too, you know, having this table of contents format is really nice because, as you all know, you can click on a certain section and it takes you right there into the book. You can't really do that with a binder or with paper. So again, it comes back to the simplicity, the ease of use. It was very beneficial to have it this way, and it just gives you kind of a holistic view of what our plan is from start to finish.
Great. Now the last piece here is, again, basically the resource section, right? This is where you go and it has the various lists, you know, detailed plans. So you see here everything from employee list, vendors that you would need to be in touch with, the management team, volunteers, insurance. Obviously, that you hope you never have to use that, but if you have a disaster of some kind, then you need to have that readily available to those who are going to work with that. Organizational charts and so on. So within the meeting book, you can provide access to these various resources your team needs to implement your BCP very effectively. So just a couple of questions for you guys, just as we're kind of trying to look at more of a summary here, part of it. What specific gains have you anticipated, or do you anticipate, with this project now that it's completed and operational?
Yeah, you know, so there were definitely several gains that we looked at here. You know, like I said earlier, it's the ease of looking at it and updating it too. You know, our examiners come every year and take a look at our shop and just make sure that we're running a safe and sound organization. But in part of that, what they look for is to make sure that we're at least testing our BCP plan annually. And so for us, when we do that, if something comes up, we can update the plan. You know, hey, maybe we forgot to add this in this certain scenario or whatnot. So we'll go ahead and update that, push out the notification to all of management. And the best part is, once our examiners come in, we give them access to the portal. And not only can they see all of our board documentation, but now they don't have to ask us for our BCP book because it's right there at their fingertips, and they'll be able to see that we worked on it, updated it, and did the test as we're required to do so. You know, also for our management team, the ease of access, you know, they can have it on their mobile device, their tablet, the computer. So basically wherever they are, it's with them. They don't have to carry a binder around. And if they, you know, open the book, it automatically downloads to the device. So if, you know, some BCP event takes place where we don't have internet connectivity, that's really helpful. And that way they, like I said, they don't have to carry that book around. Another thing that took us a little bit longer than normal was with using the portal for our board meetings. Our management team was a little slow at adopting it. When we looked in as admins, we could see, oh, okay, they never set their password yet. So we kind of had to hound them on that a little bit. That took a little bit of time to get them engaged in it, but putting in the BCP just helps further their engagement and use and adoption of the portal. So it gets them more used to it. You know, they're constantly in there, and it really helps all of us kind of be on the same page with that. You know, from a vendor management standpoint, it's always better to have one vendor than to have two. So Jason and I just redid our vendor management program as well. So we're well aware that, you know, the more efficient we can get in our vendor relations, the better. And it's, you know, cost savings for us, cost savings for our members. It was just all in all a really good outcome.
Fantastic. Now, I have one more question I'm going to pose to you, but I'm going to also remind our webinar participants that we'd love to get your questions. So if you have a question that you haven't posted yet in the Q&A area, please go ahead and do that. Jillian is watching closely, and I'm going to ask another question of the guys here, and then we're going to look over and see what questions we might be able to bring in before our webinar comes to a close. So last thing I wanted to kind of get out there was, and again, in just a general way, what advice would you give to other onboard users who, A, might be thinking about implementing a business continuity plan, but also using onboard to store it? Any advice you'd give to folks?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the biggest piece of advice is with, however you want to do it, know your audience. So is your audience your managers? Is it your board members? Who's going to have access to the BCP? If you know who your audience is, then or you can at least ask them, what's the easiest way for you to navigate through the BCP in the event that we have to activate it? Because that's the most important thing. And with that, another piece of advice would be, keep it simple. The last thing you want to do if something happens and your branch is crippled for any reason, the last thing you want to do is have to fumble through a full BCP plan and figure out what your specific responsibility is. If you know right then and there, okay, I got to go pull up the portal, click on section 3, part A, that's my job. And you're right then and there, you can, if you've got to contact your staff or whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you do that right away. And so having this simplicity in how it's structured really helps to do that. So, and it helps to get buy-in from your stakeholders who are going to use it as well.
Perfect. I think that's probably very helpful, folks. Look, I'm sure if anybody's thinking about it, they want to be able to think through all the options and think through all the reasoning and everything before they dig into it, because it is a project. So we've been watching the Q&A section, and we guys, you have done such a fantastic job that we literally haven't had the influx of questions that we thought we might. We didn't know. Hopefully, this has been really, really informative. One thing I know that we probably will get asked about later as we talk with customers from our side of things here at Customer Success is the ability to go in and make changes. Obviously, this is, like any other meeting, you can go in and adjust things if you need to. Just because you create this sort of really important document doesn't mean that you might not over time have some evolutionary change to it. So you can go in and update the agenda items. You can go in and update any documentation or resources you may have put there the same as you would now. So if you need to trade out a document, or you have a different employee list, for instance, which is probably going to happen, same as you would with any other meeting, because this meeting is ongoing and it doesn't expire, you can go in and update that documentation. So I think that we have had a great opportunity here to learn, number one, from another customer who has just found some great ways to utilize OnBoard that meets some real needs they have. But also, we've been able to provide, I think, a great backdrop to all the rest of you who are listening today to just continually look for ways to use the tool you have and figure out how can it meet specific needs. And I want to remind you that your customer success team is here standing ready all the time to try to help you with that. We have opportunities like I had here with Ryan and Jason to learn some best practices they have actually developed on their side of using OnBoard that we've made available, and we'd love to share some of those with you if we have chances to talk with you. So when you see those emails coming requesting a chance to talk about your OnBoard usage and how things are going, we look forward to hearing your stories and learning of other opportunities that we might be able to share as well, so that we can kind of spread the good news around. So I think we have here a question that did pop up while I was talking, and to share that with the presenter, I'm going to let Jill go ahead and throw that question on the air for us here.
Hi everyone. So Chuck has asked, he said, I'm new to OnBoard. How do you keep the agenda active permanently and not set to a specific meeting date? So our suggestion for best practices is to set a date about 10 years out. So you want to have something that'll at least alert you, but you want to keep it open. So our suggestion for Chuck and for those that are thinking of doing living documents like this is to select a date in the future that is far down the road, that'll keep it open for you and living in infamy. Another question we have is from Brandy, and I might actually tee up Ryan for this. So she's asked, is it difficult for you to make updates in your documentation in multiple places, i.e. changing the branch address, updating the contact information for a point of contact for who leaves the organization? I know that for us, we can't update within the document, and one change doesn't update everything within the document, but I'd love to update for Ryan, or ask Ryan to kind of answer that and see, how do you keep your documentation up to date in multiple places? What have you found that is best practice?
Yeah, so, and I'm glad Brandy asked this question, because we, as an organization, we're not always the best at making sure that everything is updated. And that's not specific to the board portal or anything. That's just when any staff changes occur. So we've made some, improvements to that over the past couple of years. And what we found works best, going back to what we're discussing now with the board portal, is having a centralized person, and a backup, so two people whose sole responsibility is to make these updates. So what we did internally, whenever we have staff changes, for example, or somebody leaves the organization, we actually have an email group where our HR department will say, okay, so-and-so has left, please please complete the necessary checklist. Everyone in that email group has a certain role. And so actually myself and one other person, our executive assistant, our role is to make sure that the board portal gets updated. So whenever we see those changes come through, we'll go in. Now, if we need to change something that's attached in a document, so like, our branch addresses, that's not going to be found in the actual agenda items, but that'll be found in a document within the agenda. That's not too difficult to do. We always keep a folder of these documents on a shared management drive. And so Chris, who's our executive assistant, Chris or myself, will go in there, we'll change the information on that document, save it to our folder, and then we'll just swap it out in the portal. So it's not too difficult to do that through OnBoard. It's actually quite easy, but really the struggle we have is more of a broad organizational wide, how do you deal with changes in the organization to where everyone, gets that update. So that's something we always try to improve upon, but with this, at least, it's fairly easy to do with the board portal.
Thank you, Ryan. Well, that wraps up the questions that we had come in. We do want to make sure that you all know, though, that if you have any other questions you think of later, and if you're like me, you'll have a question about an hour from now that you wish you had asked live, but feel free to let us know here at Passageways what questions you may have, and we'd be happy to answer those. And I want to say a very special thanks to Ryan and Jason, who worked with me over the past few weeks to kind of pull this information into a presentation. They did more work than I did, obviously, but I sure appreciate their taking time out of their very busy day, as well as the rest of you for joining us today. Hopefully this has been very helpful, exposed you maybe some new ideas, some new thoughts and ways of doing things, but ultimately we hope that it helps you be more efficient and have a better operation of your business. So again, thanks guys for joining us, and we just wish all a great rest of your day. And we look forward to talking to you again here very, very soon.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Jillian. We really appreciate the opportunity to get on here and talk with all of you about all the exciting things we're doing with Passageways. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.